Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Mr. Middlepath and this video is the Q&A commonly asked questions on marriage, how I got married and also how you can get married. And inshallah, if I missed anything, please put it down in the comments below and I'll make a part 2 video inshallah. The first question that people ask, and this is by non-Muslims usually, or new Muslims or Muslims that have just started to get back into the religion. Maybe they weren't practicing in the past, or they came from a family that wasn't that practicing, so they didn't know a lot of information about Islam. So a commonly asked question is, how do you get married to someone if dating is haram, right? Don't you have to know the person before you get married because it's such a big step? And that's a legitimate question. So the way it works is that you speak to the family first. You don't date the girl, you speak to the family first. This is traditionally how it's done. You speak to the family first. The family okays you, and then when you speak to the girl to get to know her, you're going to their home while the family's present, and they're not going to overhear everything you're saying. They're probably going to be in another room, or they're going to be in the general vicinity, and you're going to sit with the girl and you're going to talk to her. And some different schools of thought say that the girl could even take off her hijab so that you can see how she looks like before you get married to her. And different schools of thought say no, and they have differences of opinions on how much you can see from the girl. But the main point is not just to see the girl, it's also to speak with her, see what her mindset is. And after doing this a few times, usually the ball gets rolling, and then you make it official. You go to the sheikh, you get the witnesses, you do the marriage contracts, and you have the ceremony, and everybody has fun, and you're married. Now, today, in the modern age with the cell phones and how people don't really know a lot of people to get married to, or you might be part of a community, but the community isn't that big, and all of the women that your friends know, maybe their sisters, or you know some old uncles or some old dads and their daughters. When I say old uncles and old dads, I don't mean your dad or your uncle. I mean like the community members, the elders in the community that you're not related to. They might have some daughters, but their daughters are too old, too young, they're just not suitable. So you might have to go out on your own. If you go out on your own, it's kind of the same process. You're going to speak to the girl just enough to get her information or to get her family's information, and then you go speak to the family, and then what I said before basically is what is applied. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about that in the next questions.
So what's the best way for a guy to let a girl know that he's interested in her, or for a sister to let a brother know that she's interested in him?
Okay, so if a girl is interested in a guy, and there's no shame in that, but what I mean is that a girl should never tell someone that she's interested because it ruins her like value on the market or whatever. I don't think that holds any water nowadays, because everybody is getting more desperate nowadays, and there's just such a low quality of both of people in general to choose from, that, and it's very hard to find someone suitable for you. That if you find someone that you're interested in, there's nothing wrong with sending out a message. The best way for a woman to do it is to just tell someone that knows that person. Maybe she knows that guy has a sister, so she tells the sister to tell the guy, or she tells someone like her, she has a brother or a father, and she says, hey father, hey brother, I'm interested in so and so, please pass the message along that I'm interested in them, and I want that person to talk to you, to talk to my father, to talk to my brother. That's the way a sister should do it. The way a guy should do it is that he should just approach the woman directly and tell her that he's interested. That he should just approach the woman directly, tell her that he's interested, and ask for her family's contact information. Obviously not like a robot, hey, I am interested in you, please give me. No, there's a way to do it, the gentleman way to do it. And it all depends on the situation, what your personality is, that affects what you're going to say. What you're going to say is going to be different from person to person and from scenario to scenario. But the main summary is that you're interested and you want her family's contact information so that you can get to know her in a halal manner. That's just the essence of your message, right? How you pretty it up is going to be dependent on many different factors. And again, for a woman, you don't want to be doing that. You want to have someone who is your wali, or someone who is your mahram, like a brother or a family member, to send that message for you.
So what would you do in that situation? What do you think is the best thing to do?
What I did was, first of all, this is a very big step. It needs to be taken very seriously. So what I did was that when I saw someone that I was interested in, I first observed how that person interacted with others, and no, I did not stalk the person and follow them around. I was in college and the other person was in college. My wife was in college, so I just happened to be able to have many opportunities to just see who she hung out with, who she talked to, how she interacted with other people. There was like a little musalla area in the university. So when I went and prayed, I would notice that the other person prays too. So you notice little things like, okay, they pray their prayers. They don't interact with people of the opposite gender unnecessarily. There's a lot of things that you're looking out for. So after that, I started talking to people that knew her, and I said, look, I'm interested in perhaps marrying this person. Can you give me information? What do you know of her? Do you know if she's already married? Very important question. You need to know if she's already married or not. Do you know what kind of person she is? Does she practice the religion? What about this? What about? And that's very, very important, because a lot of the times someone might seem on the outside like they're practicing, but then there's a lot of skeletons in the closet, and everyone is going to have some type of baggage. You might not know it during this phase, but you have to know. You want to reduce the shock as little as possible. And then let's say you find out some things you don't like, then you decide, okay, is it worth it or not? And maybe it is worth it, so you go forward. And maybe it's not worth it. Alhamdulillah, you found that out before you ruined someone's life or asked to marry someone, and started off a whole chain of events that you couldn't, that would be difficult to reverse later on. So you find out some things you like, some things you don't like, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go forward anyways. And then you go. What I did was I went up to the sister when she was studying, and I asked if she was alone, and I asked if she had a moment to speak. And when I say alone, she was in a public place, like everyone is studying in that area. Did you have a moment to speak? And the person said, she said yes. So I said, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. I've noticed you, and I have asked about you, and I've heard nothing but good things about you, and I have noticed, mashallah, that you're a very modest person, and I would like to speak with your father, if that's okay with you. Very simple. The whole conversation lasted less than a minute and a half probably, and I left. And I even forgot to tell my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, but I even forgot to tell her my own name. I forgot to say my name, I think because I was nervous at the time. But in any case, it all went down very smoothly, it all went down very well, alhamdulillah. So
were you nervous? Were you worried?
It's very normal to be nervous and worried and to be scared, because it's a very big step. If you're not, so there's kind of a saying like cold feet, right? A guy has cold feet right before they're about to make a move like this, and you should be reflecting, right, whether you're ready for the step or whether you're not ready for the step. It's very normal to feel nervous or scared, but again, if you're sure that this is the right move, you're going to do it regardless of how you feel, because it's the right thing to do. It's kind of like getting into a fight, right? You might be somewhat fearful that you're going to get beat up, but if you know you have to fight, then you know you have to fight. And this is one of those situations. Like, you may be afraid to go to an interview, or you might be nervous about going to an interview, but you know you need that job, so you're going to go to that interview and you're going to wear that suit. So same thing with approaching a woman. If you feel like this is a good person and you genuinely want to know her and know her family so that you can see if you're compatible for marriage, then regardless of your fears or concerns, you just have to overcome that and approach.
So let's say she were to accept you after you have approached her, and she's willing to get to know you. What happens next?
What happens next depends on the situation. So she might not say yes. She might freak out. In which case, you might just have to ask again, right? And she might say yes, but I have some questions for you. In which case, let her ask her questions. Maybe, you can speak with her while, maybe let's say it all depends on the situation. There might be a situation, in my situation, for example, the person had some questions. So a friend of hers, who was a girl, and her brother and myself were all in a group chat. It was very weird, but that was what was needed to be done for everybody to feel comfortable and not feel like they're doing something haram. So we did that. I don't have any brothers or sisters. She didn't have any brothers. So that's something we had to do to kind of, so for her to feel comfortable to ask questions about what kind of person I was, and for me to ask questions to her about what kind of person that she was. Someone else might have it easier. Someone else might have a brother or a sister, and then they hang out with, and then everybody else, they just hang out together, her brother, and the other brother that's interested in getting married to her. So they all three sit together. And she's like, hey, don't tell my dad because I'm not ready for him to know yet. So she asks questions, he asks questions, they get comfortable with each other, and then they're like, okay, well, you can go talk to my family now. And other times, and for my situation, I did speak with a sheikh before I made that group chat. And if you know a sheikh, or if you know a religious scholar in your community who's wise and who has experience with these things, you can ask him and you can say, hey, this is the situation I'm in. What do you recommend for us to get to know each other so that we don't do anything haram at the same time? And most shuyukh that I've spoken to have said that it's okay to sit in a public place and speak with her for the purpose of gathering that type of information, and not for, you want to keep it short and to the point, because this is a gray area. Whenever you're hanging out with a person of the opposite gender, there's always a potential that you can cross lines and cross limits. So a rule of thumb here is to pretend that her dad is right there. And if you're saying something that you wouldn't want her dad to hear, you probably are not saying, or you probably are saying something you should not be saying. So in my case, I made it a group chat. And then for another person I know, that person spoke to that girl's brother because he knew her brother. And in another situation, so it really depends on the situation, right? You're going to have to determine the best course of action, and you should probably talk to a sheikh and say, hey, this is the situation. I don't know her family. I don't know her brothers. What do you recommend I do?
So let's say that you both decide to get to know each other. How long would that take? And when do you finally sign the marriage contracts?
Okay. So again, it all depends on the situation. So in my scenario, I we spoke for a little bit, and my wife at the time, who was not my wife at the time, but my wife said, no, I'm not ready yet. And I was like, okay. And then I asked again, and she said yes the second time. She said yes the second time. I got okay, fine, there's 3 times, but all right, but 3 times, okay. So anyways, the last time I asked, I did get the father's information. I spoke with the father, I met with the father. The father said, okay, you can get to know each other in college, and you can come get to know her at my house, right? So I'd come to her house and I'd go, and it took like a few months, and the family was like, okay, let's have a public type of engagement so that everybody at your school knows that you two are seeing each other, so that if someone sees you talking to each other, they're not going to think that you're in some type of haram relationship, and they should know that her family is okay with all of this, which I respected. Later on, it took about like 8 months almost before we actually did the actual marriage contracts, right? So it took a long time. Someone else, they might do a lot shorter time. I know that it depends from culture to culture, but sometimes they'll do it in a lot quicker time. Sometimes it'll take a lot longer. How long it should take depends on your situation. My advice is that you take as long as you need to get any red flags out of the way, and not longer than that, because you need to study her behavior. You need to observe what kind of person she is. You can't just go off of appearance. Oh, she wears hijab and she prays 5 times a day, she's the one for me. No, right? There might be a lot of things that you might not like, that she might not be compatible with you, and you didn't give yourself the time to realize that. How does she respond when she's mad at her family? How does she respond when she's mad at you? How does she behave? And she also needs to look at red flags in you. So take that time. Once you get all the red flags clear and you're like, okay, all the red flags are out of the way, this is the person for me. After that, then you should really sincerely talk to the family about, hey, I think we're ready now. I want to take a step forward, and I want to actually make the marriage official with the witnesses and with the sheikh, and sign the marriage contracts. And you really should do that sooner rather than later, because once you know that everything is fine and the relationship starts to escalate, then it can be very hard to stop anything haram from happening.
So let's say someone is willing to take the steps necessary to get married, and they are willing to do everything they need to do, but the only thing stopping them is financial and monetary reasons. And a lot of the times for people in college, that is the main reason that they're not approaching. So what should one do in that case?
You just be a man and do it. A lot of people think to themselves, oh, shuyukh and my parents and all these people say, we can't let you get married until you have a job. That's what they say in theory. But when the situation actually happens, it's a lot different. It's like a lot of girls, they say, oh, I only want a guy who's like this, this, and this. But then they see a guy that they like and they're married to that guy and he's complete opposite of all of the list that she made. The same thing with a guy. A guy might say, oh, I only like women that are like this. But then he sees another woman that he's interested in and that big list goes out the window. It's the same thing with families. You might not have a job, right? You might still be in college. But if you approach a family, right, and you say, hey, this is my situation right now financially. I'm still haven't graduated yet, but I'm on the way to graduating. A lot of families are reasonable and they'll say, okay, you can get to know her while and until you graduate, but we might not let you get married officially until you graduate. Or some families might be like, look, we've known you for a few months now. We really trust you. We know your family. We've met them. We're okay with you having the marriage contracts now. It really depends on the situation, but you have to take that step forward and you have to advocate for yourself and respect yourself and say that you are worth it, right? I'm not some rich doctor, but do you really think if someone who didn't have a job but was studying to be a doctor went up to a family and said, hey, I'm not a doctor yet, but I'm on my way to being a doctor, meaning he's going to have a lot of money. Can I get to know your daughter for the purposes of marriage and get married to her? A lot of families would say yes. A lot of families are reasonable. And this goes back to the fact that a lot of families are also desperate. And women are desperate and guys are desperate too, because it's harder and harder and harder to find someone who's suitable for marriage. Either the guy is immature, or the girl is not practicing, or the guy is not practicing, or the girl is just, she has this big long list of who she wants for her marriage. So every guy she says no, and the family's getting more and more upset, and she finally says yes to you, and you never know. The family might actually be like, yeah, sure, we'll let you get married. Let's hurry this thing along. You really don't know until it happens. So the best thing you can do is to go forth with it. And the good thing about my approach is that when you go forth and you tell the family your situation, if they are an unreasonable family and they say no, then you figured that out from the beginning and you've saved yourself months of time and a whole lot of heartache. Imagine you had talked to the girl before and you'd kept things in the dark and you'd possibly exposed yourself to starting something haram, and at the same time you never told the family, and when you finally told the family, they said no to you anyways. So you just wasted a lot of emotional investment, you wasted a lot of time, and you displeased Allah for what? It's not worth it. So just go up to the family. Doesn't matter what your situation is. Go up to the family, explain your situation. You'll find that a lot of the times families are reasonable. And even if they've been telling their daughter their whole life, we're not going to let you get married except if he's a doctor or engineer. When a guy comes finally knocking through that door, usually all of those stipulations go right out the window. We'll edit that part out.